you all have seen the Me Too hashtag. That is just not. That didn't just pop up recently. It didn't just pop up. Well, it was recent, relatively speaking, but it's not something that, as a matter of fact, is all that new. And I don't know that the person who actually invented the hashtag has really gotten the credit she deserves when it comes to that. So we're very, very happy now to be joined by a dear, dear friend who is actually she'll be participating in the women's convention this weekend, and she is the person who actually created the hashtag Me Too. Our dear, dear friend Tarana Burke. Tarana, God bless you. Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm well, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So talk to us about Me Too and how that came about.
Well, as you know, I've been working with young people. I've been working with young people for a very long time in the South. Excuse me, and was encountering a number of the girls that I worked with. I started an organization with a friend called Just Be Inc. And a number of the girls that we were working with were um, revealing that they had experienced with sexual violence.
Uh huh.
And as a survivor myself, it was really important to me that we do some work. Like that work was not just about youth leadership development, but was also about um, trying to help young girls who had experienced sexual violence find an entry point to healing. And that made me reflect on the things that I needed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That I was starting my healing process. It made me reflect on what worked for me, and what worked for me was whenever I had an opportunity to exchange empathy with a fellow survivor. And so the idea of Me Too really was sparked because it was a thing that I couldn't say to a young person at one time. That, when I was early in my journey towards healing, it was a thing that I just couldn't muster up to give to another child. And so when we started thinking about the campaign, it became clear to me that the name should be Me Too.
How did it feel to have this come back to prominence?
Strange. Strange at first, because my work has been largely centered on Black and Brown children, and women and girls, um, for over a decade, for most of my life, not over a
Mm-hmm.
decade,
Mm-hmm.
for most of my career. And so I've used, and over the time it's expanded. So I should say that I've given speeches and done workshops and with all types of groups. So it hasn't only been people of color,
Right.
but it wasn't largely known, right? The work wasn't largely known because people don't pay attention to work around preventing sexual violence until they have a reason to.
Right. Right. But it's a good thing that it's back out there, and I notice more and more of the media is starting to give you credit for coming up with it.
Yeah, that's been, and shortly after the phenomenon started, I mean, I saw it the first day and I immediately inserted myself in the conversation. And I did that because, one, I felt like hashtags are good to kickstart things and to get people amplify a conversation, but I felt like the topic needed to be grounded in a body of work. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I'm glad I, inserted the work that was behind me into the conversation, and people took notice of that because there's only so much you can say about a hashtag, right? I think people wanted more context and wanted to understand the power behind these two simple words.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's gone viral again. Do you think that this issue is finally getting the attention it deserves, Toronto?
In the mainstream, I do. I think that people are having hard conversations, from political groups to community groups. I think that and to families. Like I think it gives an entry point for people to start having conversations that they otherwise may not have had.
Yeah, yeah. 866 Sirius 866 997 4748. Toronto Burke with us, folks. She's the creator of the hashtag Me Too. If you have not had an opportunity to tell your story, you should feel the courage. Because that's the other thing about it too, Tarana. Giving women the space and the opportunity to feel comfortable telling these stories, because women are often discouraged or fearful of sharing what happened with them.
Yeah, and not just women. Like I think
Of
that
course.
it's definitely limiting for us to say, the abuse happens across the spectrum, but definitely there is a shame and a fear that survivors of sexual violence carry, that having empathy is an antidote to, right? And when you exchange empathy with somebody and let them know that they're not alone, there's a way that emboldens them to stand up in their own truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that Me Too does. It's like, oh, I'm not out here by myself. It's less of a risk if I reveal this thing. And just in the revelation of that, of that information, it's like releasing something from yourself.
Yeah.
It's like freeing up a weight.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It just lets you know, Toronto, if you don't already, and if the audience doesn't, I tweeted a Me Too story. I was sexually harassed in a job I once had when I was teaching school.
Mm.
I shared that with someone else, and they said, "Who on earth would sexually harass you?" But it did happen. It's true. It happened to me too. And
It can happen to anybody.
yeah, yeah, and it does happen across the board. And we're glad it's getting the attention it's getting. Tarana Burke, folks, also will be just participating herself in the Women's Convention over the weekend. Tell us about your role, Tarana. You going to be on a panel or speaking or what?
Yeah, I'm going to be on a panel dealing with sexual violence, and I think in the opening of the convention. So I'm really excited to have just to be on that platform and to share space with that group.
Um, I, again, I think that with all the news coming in, and everybody's, I mean, it's just an avalanche of stories. I don't know if you heard, but Mark Halperin acknowledged his misconduct today, and
Oh
is,
wow.
yeah, he is suspending himself from his work for the time being. Um, and we heard about former President Bush, the older George H.W. Bush.
Right,
So let me
right,
let me
right,
ask you
right.
let me ask you this, Teron. What are your thoughts in a situation like that? This is an old dude in a wheelchair at 93 years old. Should he get a pass?
A pass? No,
Right.
no. The thing about it is that, right, it's kind of funny for me to not funny, not funny in a actually humorous sense, but it's just so interesting to watch people's reactions and how we cherry pick, right, and also how we create boogeymen.
Right.
So people have been asking me. I've done a bunch of interviews in the last week, and people always ask me about what do you think about Harvey Weinstein and Bill O'Reilly and Bill Cosby, and I'm like, I think that they are predators, and I think that they are a representation of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of predators that exist in the world, right? So we have to stop elevating these people and calling out these isolated incidents and then being surprised, like, oh my God, there's another one. Oh my God, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are sexual predators, from sexual harassment to sexual violence, and the quicker it's just like the shock and astonishment over the number of people who tweeted Me Too. And I submit that for every tweet of Me Too, there's probably 20 other people who have not said it. Like, this problem is pervasive. I think that we have enough empirical evidence to show that. And so the conversation needs to pivot at this point from, oh God, look at the numbers of predators and survivors, to what do we have to do collectively to interrupt sexual violence? And it's not cherry picking people here and there to
Yeah.
say,
Right.
you're
Right.
guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty.
Right. Right. Because now it's becoming sort of a scorecard. You know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's just it. We're just announcing people every day, so we know how common it is. So Toronto, what steps? Name a few steps you recommend to bring this to an end.
Well, one thing is that there's this acknowledgement, right? So we are sort of in a phase one moment where there's massive acknowledgement of this problem, the problem of sexual violence, and also the acknowledgement of the spectrum of sexual violence. I often get asked like, well, why do you put sexual harassment and sexual assault in the same conversation? And it's because sexual violence or gender-based violence is on a spectrum that starts with sexual harassment, right? And we give permission, or it's like an entry point to larger crimes. So acknowledging the numbers, acknowledging that there's a spectrum, and then we need to start having different conversations. If we acknowledge that those numbers are true, then that means that we have to reshape how we deal with children in school. We have to reshape the conversations we have with children.
Right.
We have to look at our curriculum.
Right.
We have to talk as a community about solutions. I can come and sit here and we can have a conversation, and you and I can brainstorm and come up with a number of solutions, and there's still tons more. And every community is different, every family is different.
Right.
But we need to have out loud, collective conversations about the kind of solutions we need for us as individuals and for us collectively as communities. So I think that those are concrete things people can have. If you can call a town hall meeting about taxes, about police brutality, about whatever, you can call a town hall meeting about the sexual violence in your community.
Right.
Small communities can do things like let's evaluate what the policies are in our schools for vetting teachers, right? Like that's just a small example. Let's look at what are the policies we have in place in our community that allow sexual violence to flourish.
Yeah.
So I think it starts with conversations, and then conversations lead to action, right? Those conversations have to be. You have to come into the conversation with a commitment to come out of it with some action steps, with some tasks.
Right. Tarana, is there a website where people can go and get involved in this movement?
Yes. My website is MeToo.support. And so there's the site is being revamped, but it's up and operational, and you can get some information. And in the next week, there'll be a newer site with more information on it.
Right.
And we encourage people to go. When you go to the site, there's a number. You can text MeToo to this number to be added to our list so people can stay abreast of what's happening and all the different changes. And we're also going to be releasing a series of webinars over the next few weeks, because I think this moment is to help people process, right? Like it's one thing to disclose your status as a survivor of sexual violence, but then after the hashtag has died down and you turn off your computer, people need a way to process all of this.
Right.
So we're hoping that the webinars provide that for people.
MeToo.support should be at the Women's Convention this weekend, too. Tarana Burke, the hashtag MeToo. If you haven't had a chance to share your story, please do. Miss you, girl.
I miss you too, Mark. I'll see you in summer.
Of course. Tarana Burke. and I'll see you in Detroit this weekend, too. All right.
Good. Okay, I can't wait to see you.
All right. Take care now.
All right.
MeToo.support. Tarana, at Tarana Burke on Twitter. Also, the hashtag MeToo. Share your story if you haven't, folks. Thanks, Tarana. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Sirius XM Progress 127, Resistance Radio. Get woke, get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.